Joe, a lot has been made about the University of Florida, man. A lot.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just first off, as we do our Florida deep dive here, we're going to talk a lot of Florida here tonight, along with the SEC schedule. They do have some athletes now. They do have some dudes. What I don't like when I hear people talk about Florida is people misunderstanding that they don't have dudes, because they do. They got the Goodwin kid, the 5-star offensive lineman for Kentucky. He's going to probably play right tackle if he doesn't get moved over to left. Ricky Pearsall returns. Montrell Johnson, along with Trevor Etienne, returns. Chris McClellan, and I'm just going to tell you this. I don't know if Chris McClellan is going to be a good defensive tackle or not, but every Florida defensive lineman that ever wears a single digit for their team in the history of football is always a dude. Always a dude. So Chris McClellan, welcome to the show as he wears number 7. Here's where and look, they have a former 5-star safety that they recruited, Kamari Wilson. They have athletes, man. I know a lot of players at the portal. I know that you got a lot of things that they got to overcome. Here's the problem that I have with them. They're not that great on the outside. They're going to have to rely on some very young receivers. And by the way, Graham Mertz is going to be their quarterback. And Graham Mertz, I do not trust. I think that they fired Dan Mullen and thought that they would get better in recruiting. They're not. They're not. So, man, I don't have a lot of faith. I do not have a lot of faith in them.
Here's my thing with Florida, and I tried to bring this up when we did one of our SEC conference previews when we talked about Florida, and you pushed back pretty heavily on me. I think that Florida has a lot of work to do. But as you talked about here, they have a lot of athletes. They have a lot of good, explosive football players that need coaching, need to make improvements before they can actually actualize it on the football field. But they also had a really good transfer portal haul. Then you mentioned some of the kids that they got. RJ Moten from Michigan was one of the top-rated safeties that was in the portal. Caleb Banks, they pulled the defensive lineman from Louisville. And then I'm Goodwin, as you mentioned. I'm not going to try to pronounce his first name because
that's why I didn't either, because I would have obliterated it, man.
But he is with such a difficult position to recruit in the portal. Was one of the top tackles coming from the University of Kentucky. To pull that is going to bolster the offensive line. I'm also a pretty big fan of what Etienne brings to the running back position. But you just hit the nail on the head there with the lack of talent on the outside, the lack of explosiveness at receiver, but most importantly, and you can bet your ass that I'm going to relate this back to Anthony Richardson, Blake.
Of course you are.
They had a top 4 pick on their roster playing the quarterback position. And one of the things that was talked about with Anthony Richardson is that if he takes a progression coming into last year, he could be one of the best players in the SEC. He didn't progress, and he was drafted based on a projection. That lack of progression is on Billy Napier. It is very concerning that one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the country didn't improve at all coming into the season, and at times was a significant liability. So I can't sit here and be optimistic, and I think it's Graham Mertz. We're assuming it's Graham Mertz.
Who else would it be?
I don't know. There hasn't been a ton of clarity, but Graham Mertz is so bad that maybe there's somebody else behind him that sneaks out and plays better than him. But I can't be confident that Graham Mertz puts it together and plays well this year, because if you can't get Anthony Richardson to play up to the level you need him to, Graham Mertz sure as hell is not going to. If you don't have at least an average quarterback in the SEC, you sure as hell are not going to go 500.
Man, look, I don't like to make a lot of spring games, and I'm not going to make one here, but it wasn't good. Okay. They did not have a good spring game. And look, they've had a lot of chaos surrounding them. Okay. Whether it be Jaden Rashada, whatever it may be, they've had a lot of chaos. Okay. And things have been somewhat quiet, but they're not recruiting at a high level. Considering where Florida probably should be, they're 21st in the country right now. Now they finished in the top 15. They finished at 12, but you got to be better at Florida in recruiting than being 12th.
Right. You need to. Florida is such a desirable. It's good, actually, very underrated academic school, but it's a very desirable program. There's no reason why they shouldn't be top 7. absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be top 7.
Well, at least if they fall out a year or two, you got to get there at least twice in 2 years. Like
Yes.
if every 4 years, you got to be there twice because look, they have 4 Power 5 schools in that state. UCF, Miami, Florida State, and Florida. That's the most, I think, in any state outside of California, maybe. So, and I don't even think,
well, outside of USC, like UCLA doesn't really kill it on the trail.
Am I leaving somebody out that might be a Power 5 in California?
Cal, I don't know if I'd really count them.
So, but still, regardless, I mean, look, I just don't have any faith in them at their skill positions. I don't have any faith in them at quarterback. I don't have any faith in them along the defensive line, really outside McClellan. They're going to have a lot of young guys step up. Now, they did go into the transfer portal. They did go get R.J. Moten that could play safety and help a young core out. They went out and got Ronald Nunnery, who's another guy that could play safety for them. The problem is if Billy's going to continue to run, I don't think it really comes down to athletes as much as it, like you mentioned, I don't think it comes down to athletes as much as it comes down to I don't trust Billy Napier, and I never have. Billy Napier is always going to be tied with 2 other head coaches, that being Lincoln Riley when he went to USC and Brian Kelly when he was at LSU. I think he was the least, and Brent Venables at Oklahoma. I think of all the hires, it was the worst. I like Billy. I think Billy's a good offensive coach, but you're going to have to show me something at some point. If you're going to run Graham Mertz out there for me, sorry, bud. Sorry.
That's where I'm coming from with this is like, we've already done, this is actually probably the first like negative one that we've done. We every other one, we've been super optimistic, and it's because they're ranked in the top 25, and they're ranked in the top 25 for a reason. We're talking about how they're going to be in the conversation in the top of their division or in their conference. I don't see something that I can go, well, if this works out, they're going to win 8 games, 9 games. I can't find something tangible on their roster. What momentum do they have from last year that they're carrying into this upcoming season that is positive?
Look, let me throw this out. And I know Banks said that first off, it's not that they have the best average. Average means nothing when you don't have enough dynamic players. Okay?
What does that mean? Best player average is like the best average rated recruit? Is that what the argument is?
I don't know, but you can have 2 5-stars, but that's 2 dudes that can't help you now, right? Like,
yeah. And if you're trotting those guys out, all those guys out, it's a problem.
Well, there's a lot of teams that get multiple 5-stars and have. Texas comes to mind. How's Texas been? It's
Texas
about
A&M.
Texas A&M. It's been about the entire class. I just have zero faith in Billy Napier. Look, Joe, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I'm going to disagree with you. I do think that Anthony Richardson made progressions, okay, and kind of some vast ones. I think he learned how to read coverage better. I think he was better in the pocket than he was with Dan Mullen. There were things that he got better at. But this pistol, long zone, wide zone is not going to work in the SEC. You have to get north and south. And Billy, of all people, should know that since he's been with Nick Saban in Alabama. They do have some pieces along the offensive line. But they lost games last year with the top 4 pick in the NFL drafted quarterback that they have zero business losing. They beat Texas A&M when Texas A&M had, Joe, was it 27 players out for the flu or something crazy like that? Yeah. You can't lose to Vandy. You just can't lose to Vandy. So why should I come in here with any hope whatsoever that they're going to be better? Where did they get better? If a Florida fan or media member can come in here and tell me where they've gotten better, okay then. Well, we got better at this position. Well, you lost Osiris Torrance. If you got Goodwin, well, Osiris Torrance is out. So are you going to remain the same? Well, Blake, it's a different position. One's a guard, one's a tackle. It's still an offensive piece along that offensive line. What are you going to do with a younger group outside? Look, you have 2 guys at wide receiver that you're going to have to hope you hit on that are freshmen in Aiden Mizell and Jakeem Jackson. Because outside of that, Joe, you got Caleb Douglas is one of their receivers, and he's a former 3-star. We set on him to make things happen. No, you're not. No, you're not. And quite honestly, do they throw the football at a high enough clip, and do they have the weapons on the outside to compete in the SEC? No, they don't. This isn't Georgia. They're not going to be able to line up and run the ball down someone's throat. Let me say this.
Okay.
They can run the football and do it at somewhat of an effective clip, but not at what everybody thinks that they can. And you're going to be able to have to throw the ball down the field, and Graham Mertz is not going to lead you there.
I will say this. I'm not saying I disagree with your statement, but if something does work out for Florida and something does help them win football games, it will be running the football. I really like Trevor Etienne.
Joe,
I know he's not a big back.
The bigger teams, Florida State, LSU, Georgia, guess what happened? I don't care if you're running the ball against South Carolina. I don't care if you're running the ball against Tennessee. I don't care if you're running the ball against other teams. When you got to play those teams that you're normally compared to, you got to win.
Well, right. This is where like it's very problematic for me because the take I was just about to state, I almost didn't preface it with this. It's a foregone conclusion that they're going to lose to those teams. It just is. But that shouldn't happen for Florida. That shouldn't be happening with a program that is as prestigious and as consistently successful as Florida. We shouldn't be sitting here saying that it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to lose to the top teams on their schedule. But I mean, to that point, if they get to 7 wins, it's going to be because they run the ball well against the crappy teams on their schedule. That's what's going to take. But I have no optimism that they can upset somebody.
No, they got to make sure that they beat Vandy.
Who do you realistically, and I think we kind of talked about this when we did the division preview for them. How many games do you think that they win in 2023?
2023. So this year, how many games do I think they win? And they were 7-6 a year ago, 7-5. No, they were 6-6.
Yes, they were 6-6.
6-7. I think they lost their ball game, correct?
Yeah, they got dogged. Like I
think their ceiling is 7 wins.
That's where I'm at. I think that realistically it's 6-6 again. But are we at the point where we can sit here and commit to maybe them being worse than that? Can we sit here and say that maybe they're worse than 6-6? Like I don't know if I go that far. That's where I calm myself a little bit.
Say that again.
I don't know if I can go as far as to say that they finished the season below 500.
Well, where did they get better?
Nowhere. I think they've remained pretty stagnant. Because they did pull some kids in the portal, but they also lost a bunch of kids, mostly depth, and they also lost Anthony Richardson.
No, they're not. I don't know if they're going to get. They're not going to be above 6-6.
What does it take for Billy to get fired?
Go 6-6.
You think they fire him after a 6-6 year?
Are they going to allow him to have a third year?
That's why I'm bringing up this question. Is that like I'm trying to think of what would lead to them saying, "All right, we've seen enough," because this roster is not good enough as we're talking about to win more than 7 games. It's not. So if they get to 7 wins and they pull that out,
if they get to 7 wins, maybe he gets another year. But let me tell you something. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who, look, LSU has played Florida every year. I remember the 2007 game with Jacob Hester and Tim Tebow. And look, LSU and Florida back and forth have had fantastic games. And LSU's going to play Florida again. They're going to keep that rivalry for whatever it's worth. Here's my thing. Okay? They're not even remotely close to where they need to be. And I think the fan base is pissed off. They fired Billy Napier a year after coming off an SEC East championship and one bad year because he wasn't recruiting at a good enough level. What are you going to do with Billy Napier when he's not winning?
Well, exactly my point.
And I don't know if their AD makes it through it. I mean, how many coaches head football coaches is he going to hire before he gets the can?
How long has he been there? You might know this.
I'd have to look up how many years, Scott. Somebody to check might be. It feels like he's been there for close to a decade. Now I could be wrong there, but I mean if I'm not mistaken. I mean, look at the head coaches that they've hired in the last couple of years. They've hired Mullen. They've had Muschamp. They had McElwain.
God, not as and the Mullen was the best one.
And Mullen arguably was the best one.
I think. I don't know if there's even an argument because like was McElwain good enough to be a part of that argument?
He constantly won the SEC East when the SEC East was down. But remember, he lied about the credit card fraud thing, and he got caught up in a lie, and they fired him. And man had that dude had more yellow teeth than the dude looked like a horse. They have been horrendous, and I mean horrendous at legitimately hiring head football coaches. They're notorious at this point for hiring bad head coaches in football. Billy Napier's system and scheme, Joe, we went through this all during the season. You're going to have to show me where they're advanced at a college level scheme-wise, because we put on the all-22 copy and they're not advanced. You can't run a slant and then turn around and run a sluggo and think that you're going to confuse people. Here's the ultimate question. How much did Anthony Richardson how much did he overcome with deficiencies? So let me ask you this. If Anthony Richardson goes into Indianapolis and balls out for whatever reason,
which he will,
Florida chokes, okay, how horrible is that going to look on Billy?
It looks terrible. And that was what my whole leading argument is that to have that guy on your roster and for him to actually develop when given direction and given proper development, that is a huge indication of the concern here for Billy Napier, because as you're talking about, he's supposed to know what he's doing offensively, and he can't even get his quarterbacks to play up to the level of expectation or to improve. You need some level of improvement from those guys that are that ultra explosive and ultra athletic. I just do wonder though, like Brian Harson's the example that comes back to this all. He was in and out really quick. Terrible job recruiting. I feel like Napier's done a better job recruiting early on than what Brian Harsin did.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I will agree with that. But Harsin, man, is he Brian Harsin?
We made that allegory.
Brian Harsin? No, because Billy just recruits at such a higher level than Harsin did.
Yeah, the reason why we made that comparison very early on in this process when we talked about the Jaden Rashada stuff is that they both had like off-season, behind closed doors drama that we were kind of speculating on.
Billy didn't have sex with a secretary though.
Allegedly, but that's the
Clessy's cheeks. Hold on, Harsin was clapping Clessy's cheeks. Shout out to Clessy. That's her name, by the way. Clessy's her name. She was a cheerleader at Boise State, and she followed him here.
My point is that there was
he was clapping Clessy's cheeks.
My point is that there were conversations that were had about rumors that the
booster, yes, Clessy,
that the boosters were trying to push out there to have cause to fire him.
Well, and that's the real truth. That's the real truth.
And I think that there could be a comparison made between what happened there and now what happened this past offseason with the whole Jane Rashada thing, because it's a lot of he said, she said.
Well, nobody Florida's got a crap load of money. I'm just wondering when they go and make a move like what USC did or what LSU did. And look, you can hate what Oklahoma did, but like what Oklahoma did, listen. Even let's call it what it is. Even Heupel is a better coach, I think, and had a little bit more of a track record than Napier did. Look, Billy won the Sun Belt. Billy would get his cheeks clapped when it was crunch time. Coastal Carolina would clap them ever living cheeks now.
Yeah.
Look, I don't like Billy's offense. I think his offense is too high school. I don't trust a guy that says that I cut my own hair. Head coaches don't cut their own hair, Joe. I don't trust it. It's like guys that, put their hats all the way like this. Like, I don't trust him. Here's the bottom line, though. I can dislike Billy Napier as the play caller. I do think he's a good coach. I think he's a good leader of men. A lot of those kids like him a lot. I think that says a lot about him as a person. and as a coach. But the bottom line is they just don't have the dudes, man. And look, I know Austin. I've told you this. I think I've showed you times that we've been together, and Austin's a great coach. Austin Armstrong's a great coach. They better pray to God they got the defensive version of Joe Brady. They better pray to sweet Jesus. But they ain't got no – I mean –
they do have some athletes on the defensive side of the football.
They got some
play
pieces
really
up
well.
front. I'll give them that. But their secondary is inexperienced. But, I mean, look, you went out to the transfer portal and got 2 safeties that can play for you right away. You went out and got
D-lineman as well.
D-lineman as well. They do – look, they're not like – you're not just going to walk into Gainesville and beat the shit out of them. Like, that's not going to happen.
No.
The problem is offensively, I think they're so dormant at quarterback and the weapons on the outside. Yeah, you can run the ball, but when a team look, it's a Les Miles effect, right? Like it's a Sam Pittman effect. You know what teams do against Sam Pittman? I talked to you're going to know who the coordinator is as soon as I say that. So no, it's not LSU. But I talked to an SEC coordinator the other week, and he was already calling and he was making jokes. And he's out here saying stuff like, dude, we literally put 7-8 guys in the box with a free high safety, and we're like, please throw the football. Right? Like, please throw the football. The bottom line is for me is when you get to brass tacks, can they do enough to win 7 games? And I don't think that they can. I really just don't see it anywhere. So I know that a lot of Florida people are going to get mad at us behind this, but Joe, I'm going to stick with my guns. I don't think they get to 7 wins. And if they do, I think, well, look, if they do, I will come on here and apologize to Billy Napier. Like I that doesn't bother me.
Really?
Yeah, because look, I have no, Joe, I used to do a segment where Blake was right, where Blake was wrong. And I'll do it again. I have no problem saying where I was wrong. The problem is that I just don't see it. Like the eye in the sky's got to matter at some point instead of, oh, we got this guy, we got that guy. It's not easy to turn over your roster and turn over a coaching staff 2 years in a row and think you're going to be any good. That's the one thing that we haven't mentioned, Joe, about Florida. They've had a roster turnover and they've had a coaching turnover. So everybody's learning something new again defensively. Good luck. That's all I got to say about it.
Yeah, and final thought on that, and it kind of just reiterates everything we talked about. There's just so much turnover. I will say that if there are more recruiting wins and they do pull some more highly rated kids, that could buy Billy some time, because what we talked about earlier is that Dan Mullen didn't really recruit and he didn't do it at a high level. So it might take him longer.
I mean, but yeah, okay, well, he didn't recruit. I understand what you're saying there. He won the SEC East.
But what I'm trying to get at is,
I don't care what the
Billy's using the roster that didn't have is currently using the roster.
It
had Anthony Richardson, but outside of that, what big recruits did
they all went in the portal? That's not on Dan.
And that is true.
That's not on Dan.
Yeah,
Billy went through more kids in the portal than I go through draws in a year.
My point is that if Billy sticks around, he's going to need to have some massive wins in the portal. That's what he's going to, or not in the portal.
He's going to have to hit on every portal piece he brought in.
And every upcoming recruit as well.